Hello, I'm Karen Henderson, and the title of my talk is Using e-Assessment to Provide Targeted Online Mathematics Support. I'm an Associate Professor in Technology Enhanced Learning in the Department of Engineering, Design and Mathematics at the University of the West of England in Bristol, and I'm also a mathematician. So this work was funded by UWE's pedagogic scheme and ran in the 2018-19 academic year. It was a collaboration between the Learning Innovation Unit and two departments of the Faculty of Environment and Technology. Rhys Gwynthew led the project, and the other team members are listed on the slide. Rhys Gwynthew, Emily Walsh, myself, and Kevin Golden are all mathematicians working in the Department of Engineering, Design and Mathematics. Oliver Haslam is from the Learning Innovation Unit, and Patrick O'Flynn and Danny Elvidge are both from the Department of Architecture and the Built Environment. I should stress that although I'm giving this talk, others have done far more work on the project than me. So the plan of my talk is as follows. Firstly, I'll give you some background of the problem we wanted to address and how we went about planning the resource. Then I'll give you a demonstration of the resource and an overview of it, and finally finish with a discussion and our plans for future work. So despite Mathematics A-level being the most popular subject taken, this qualification is not a requirement to study many quantitative courses in higher education. For example, courses such as computer science, business studies, environmental science, all require some mathematical background, but at UWE and elsewhere in the UK, Maths A-level is not an entry requirement. Many such courses include some top-up maths content, but some students will enter university without having studied mathematics since GCSEs, so that's at age 16, and can find this daunting. Research shows that lack of confidence is one of the main reasons that students find the transition to higher education difficult, so the focus of our project was how to address this skills and confidence gap. And what we've done is to develop a diagnostic tool and online resource with the aim of providing support for non-mathematics students, by which I mean students who are coming onto courses which do not require Mathematics A-level. So I'm not talking about students coming onto a maths degree or onto an engineering degree. It's onto courses where there's some maths content, but it's not the primary focus. And by allowing applicants access to the resource once they've confirmed their place on the course, our aim is to increase the mathematical ability and awareness of students prior to starting at university. So this would benefit students in that they would be confident about applying to UWE and feel more supported in their transition to university and start their course with a stronger mathematical base. Our first steps were to carry out an investigation into the mathematical requirements of students from the courses across all the faculties at UWE. The user logs from Espresso Maths, which is the university-wide mathematics support drop-by station, pinpointed which courses and the specific areas of mathematics in which students currently require extra support. And two courses were identified to be in the pilot study, namely foundation students on BSc Architecture and Health Science Apprenticeships. Danny Elvidge, who's on the project team, is heavily involved with the architecture course, so that was an obvious choice. And we can see that science was the biggest user of Espresso Maths for maths, as opposed to statistics questions. And after discussions with academics in that faculty, the Health Science Apprenticeship cohort was suggested as a suitable course. This course has entry points throughout the year and isn't just a September start. For each of these courses, a list of key mathematical topics were identified. So from now on, I'm just going to focus on the Health Science Apprenticeship route. So for this programme, we identified 4 key topics, and within these topics, we identified subtopics. So the 4 key topics identified were algebra, graphs, numbers, and data. And then, for example, within the topic of graphs, we identified 2 subtopics, namely plot and interpret straight line graphs and graphs involving distance, speed, and acceleration. So the learning resource that we've created is web-based, and has intelligent branching, which provides decision trees to navigate the student through the resource. Hopefully you'll see what we mean by intelligent branching when I give you a demonstration. The Dewis e-assessment system is used as the primary diagnostic tool, which then signposts the user to further online learning materials as required. So let me tell you a little bit more about Dewis. It's an algorithmic e-assessment system which was developed in-house and was first used for summative assessments in 2007. It's now widely used in the university, particularly in the business school and in all 4 departments of the Faculty of Environment and Technology. It supports random parameters, and you can use a lot of different question types, such as numeric, algebraic, multiple choice, multiple response, as well as marking computer code. It has lossless data collection, which means that information on every assessment attempt by every single student attempt is stored. It's got student-friendly features built into it, such as pre-submission checks and network down recovery. And being server-based, it's able to interact with other packages, such as Xerte, which is what we've used in this project. In constructing the resource, referring back to the previous page, we listed topics and subtopics, and for each subtopic, we identified key skills associated with it. So, for example, the subtopic of simplifying algebraic expressions, which sits in the topic of algebra, 2 key skills were identified, namely simplifying linear expressions and simplifying non-linear expressions. For each of these key skills, a Xerte Learning Resource has been created, which I'll show you when we look at the resource itself. So now what I want to do is to give you a demonstration of the resource so I can show you some of the features. So this is the front page of the resource for health science apprenticeships. First thing to show you is that there are 3 different access options. You can access anonymously, pseudo-anonymously, in which case you would set up your own username password, or by embedding the resource within your university's VLE. At UE, we use Blackboard. If the latter 2 options are selected, then the system records the student's performance and keeps track of where they've got to within the resource. So this means that you can return to the resource at a later date and pick up where you left it. But if accessing pseudo-anonymously, then we as academics won't know who the student is, just which course they're on. So the first 2 options, going in anonymously or pseudo-anonymously, would be suitable for pre-registered students, so students who haven't yet started at university, so don't have university logins yet. But the latter option, so embedding within a VLE, would be more suitable for registered students. And in this example, I've chosen to enter the resource anonymously, so I've been allocated a username of guest. So in this case, our progress, or my progress, will be stored only for the duration of the session. Once the browser's been shut down, then all the data for the sessions will be discarded. Coming down, we can see the 4 mathematical topics in the blue blocks. And clicking on these topics, the subtopics appear. Icons to the right of each subtopic enable a student to track their progress through the resource. So the green semicircle indicates that I've accessed but not completed that subtopic. And the green ticks show that the activities associated with that particular subtopic have been successfully completed. Also, if you click on the eye to the right of each topic, then brief additional information about what is involved in each topic, as well as why it's important for your course, is revealed. Now, each subtopic is a link which takes the student to a short e-assessment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on this subtopic, which is that of plot and interpret straight line graphs. So by starting a new test, it's going to take me to an e-assessment, which is going to gauge my understanding of that particular subject. And this in turn will enable the system to guide me to further resources on that particular subtopic, depending on my performance. So in this case, 2 questions have been presented involving plotting and interpreting straight line graphs. So I'm going to try and answer the second one correctly. So I want the value for the gradient and the value for the y-intercept, but I'm going to deliberately answer the first question incorrectly. So I don't know, let's put 5.678. Now note, this is an example of a pre-submission check. The question asked us to present the answer to 2 decimal places, but we've had a warning that we've entered our answer to 3 decimal places, but actually only 2 were required. So let me fix that up. Doesn't mean the question I'm going to have answered it correctly, but I have now answered it to 2 decimal places. And the other thing to state is that because Dewis is algorithmic, each time a student enters the test, students are presented with different realizations of the question. On submitting answers, then the submission is automatically marked and we're presented with a report detailing how we did on the test in the summary page. Note that no marks are presented here, just statements as to whether the question has been answered correctly or incorrectly. And this non-disclosure of marks is a deliberate feature of the resource, and the Dewis architecture had to be amended to accommodate this. We wanted to avoid the potentially demoting effect of students receiving low scores. I'll now show you what is shown by each of these buttons within the summary section. So clicking on feedback, we get a fully worked solution for the questions that were presented. So we see the question that had been presented, a fully worked solution, and the report that we saw on the previous page. For question 2, again, here is the question that the student was presented with, here's the fully worked solution, and here's the report. Clicking on the next button along, which is what you did well, gives us access to this page. Remember that I answered the second question correctly, but not the first. So in this case, the subtopic is split into 2 key skills. Those being to be able to obtain the gradient and y-intercept from the equation of a straight line, and to be able to obtain the gradient of a line passing through 2 points. And for the e-assessment presented here, it just happens to be partitioned such that each question assesses just one of these skills. However, it is possible to have more than one question testing the same skill, for one question to assess more than one skill. So by answering the second question correctly, I've been identified as being able to obtain the gradient and y-intercept from the equation for a straight line. I've got the option of viewing additional resources, which is a Xerte Learning Resource. And some students may want to access all the material, but the website that we've created has been designed to target the areas that a particular student needs additional help with. So it's not necessary for students to click on and access that. Clicking on the next button along, which is what you need help on, we get directed to this page. So because I got the first question wrong, and this was identified with the key skill of obtaining the gradient of a line passing through 2 points, I've been directed to view a learning resource associated with this key skill. Note we have a visual symbol together with text indicating that I haven't yet viewed the resource. I'm now going to click on this learning resource and let's see what it looks like. So this is an example of a Xerte Learning Resource, and one of these pages was created for every key skill identified. So each Xerte Learning Resource is a web browser tool containing partition regions that can interact with the user and each other. Each of the regions contain a learning resource, such as, for example, instructional videos, e-assessments, Dewis or otherwise, text and images. Typically, on accessing the Xerte Learning Resource, students are directed to first watch a video, which is playing in this top left-hand corner. Key points can be indicated in the commentary area, which is this right-hand box of the page, and breakpoints can be inserted into the video in order to add emphasis. Finally, having watched the video, students may practice the mathematical subject that they've just learnt about by testing themselves using the assessment which appears in this bottom left-hand page. And I should stress that the project focused on collating material as opposed to generation. So the videos here are ones which we have found in the public domain, so typically they're YouTube videos, and for the test yourself, we tended to use e-assessment questions that were already created. So let me just play this for. Okay, enough of that. And at times we'll have breakpoints here, which will pause the video, will highlight key points, so a commentary can come up here. So the idea was that students are watching this material almost with a tutor over their shoulder, pointing out the important points. So trying some practice questions, then in this case, there's only one practice question, but there could have been more. And we can try this as many times as we want, and this isn't recorded. And students can try over and over again until they feel they've mastered that subject. And students are directed to, at the end of their practice attempts, to go back to the summary to try the test again. So let's go back to the summary. So now you can see that the visual symbol has changed, and the text has changed, so we can see that we have now viewed this learning resource. Once students have accessed the learning resource, they're recommended to have another attempt at the assessment. In fact, they could have done this prior to accessing additional help. So the summary page sits as a tab in the resource, and so the try again button is always available. On clicking this, another Dewis assessment opens up, but with different parameters as before. Note that because when I tried this assessment previously, I answered the second question correctly, you'll see that there are green smiley faces next to the input boxes associated with this question. Clicking on these automatically populates the answers. The reason for including this feature is to allow students to concentrate on the questions that they need help with. Of course, they could answer those questions themselves if they so wish. So what I want to do now is I want to get the question correct. So I'm just going to use my calculator to work out what the gradient of this line is. So having just done this question on my calculator, I think the answer is minus 1.43. And now I'm going to submit my answers. So happily I got that one correct. But having answered all of the questions correctly, then I will have successfully completed this subtopic. So if I go back to topic home, we can see that I've successfully completed the topic of plot and interpret straight line graphs within graphs. I can still access my summary. I could still have another go if I wanted. And if I come back to home, then we can see I've now got a green tick against that subtopic. Once students have successfully completed every subtopic, then they will have successfully worked through all the material in this resource, in which case they're going to get awarded a completion certificate. Other things to note, we have tried to design the resource so that it's got a clear interface which allows easy navigation with consistent icons to allow students to track their progress. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to show you within the resource. Let me come back now to the PowerPoint, and I'll finish up by talking about a bit of implementation and evaluation. In terms of implementation and evaluation, some of the Xerte Learning Resources were trialled on Architecture's Foundation students in November last year. Danny Elvidge, who teaches these students, created his own videos, walking students through some of the trickier topics. He received many positive comments from students, and I've just included one quote here, which hopefully you can read from the screen. Also, the complete resource was made available to a group of health science apprenticeships in late January this year. In terms of next steps, now that the Dewis Xerte structure is in place, it's relatively easy to create further resources. So to create something similar for another course, we would need to determine what topics, subtopics, key skills are relevant, and to identify suitable YouTube videos and existing assessment questions. So it's more of a case of collating resources as opposed to generating new material. With only minor changes, it will be suitable for use for our foundation engineers, and we plan to make it available to students once the A-level results have been released and the students have unconditional firm offers. Those students can be sent a copy of this in order for them to prepare themselves in a structured way before coming onto the course at UE. And we're also going to look at setting something similar up for our first year students, pitching it at more sort of AS plus level maths. And I think that's going to be especially useful this year because of the disruption due to COVID. It'll be a useful activity for them to do during induction and the first few weeks of the semester. So finally, if you want to explore the resource yourself, then please just click on the link shown on this slide, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.